Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into a really interesting company called NPST. Now, you might not know the name, but they are a massive player right in the middle of India's incredible digital payments revolution. So, let's get right into it.
Okay, to get why Nespatat is so fascinating, you have to start with this chart. I mean, just look at it. This is what explosive growth looks like in the wild. After some steady years, the company's revenue just went vertical, jumping a crazy 212% in a single year to hit 128 crores. It's that classic hockey stick curve that gets every investor's attention. But, and this is a big but, here's where the story takes a weird turn. Right as that rocket ship was blasting off, the people you'd expect to be climbing aboard were, well, jumping off. While revenue was going through the roof, institutional investors, the so-called smart money, were basically running for the exits. Their ownership in the company crashed from almost 10% all the way down to practically zero. So what on earth did they see that made them run from a company that looked like a sure thing? And that right there is the big question we're going to tackle. Is NPST this incredible, high-growth rocket ship you want to be on? Or are there some serious warning signs blinking that make this more of a cautionary tale? Let's break it all down. First things first. To really get the excitement here, we have to look at the business itself. Let's start with the bull case. What is it that NPST actually does to generate all this buzz?
So you really can't talk about NPSE without first talking about UPI. The easiest way to think about UPI is as the digital superhighway for all money in India. It's the magic system that lets you pay for your tea or send cash to a friend instantly, just using your phone. And it has completely changed the game for the country's economy.
So where does NPST fit into all this? Well, they're what's called a technology service provider, or a TSP. When you scan a QR code to buy something, it's companies like NPST whose tech is humming away in the background, working for the bank. They make sure your payment request is processed securely and that the money zips from your account to the shopkeepers, all in the blink of an eye. They're basically building and paving a crucial lane on that digital highway. And this company's not just resting on its laurels, no way. Their ambition is huge. They're trying to take their Indian success story and replicate it in new markets, like Africa and the Middle East. At the same time, they're cooking up new stuff at home, using AI to stop fraud, even figuring out how to make payments work when you're offline. You see, each one of these isn't just a new line item, it's a potential new hockey stick for their growth chart.
All right, so that all sounds pretty great, right? But remember those investors who ran for the hills? It's time to flip the coin over. Let's get into the bear case and see what warning lights are flashing. The first big red flag, a pretty major miss on performance. The company basically told the market to expect about 87% revenue growth for the fiscal year. What they actually delivered? More like 35%. Now look, 35% growth is still fantastic for most companies, but when you fall that short of your own promise, it makes the market really, really nervous.
So what happened? Well, the company chalked it up to a client shifting to something called a multi-bank model. In plain English, that just means one of their big clients decided, hey, we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. While the company says this is just a short-term issue, it definitely threw a whole lot of uncertainty into the mix about how stable their revenue is going forward. And that client thing, it kind of shines a light on all the other risks. I mean, NSPST isn't playing on an empty field here. They're going toe-to-toe with absolute giants like Razorpay and Pine Labs. And that dream of going global, it's exciting, but it's also incredibly hard and super expensive to get right. Throw in a stock price that can swing wildly because so few big institutions own it, and you start to see the picture. The real takeaway here is that their path forward has almost zero room for error. Okay, so we've laid out the pros and the cons. But there's one final, absolutely critical piece of the puzzle we need to look at: the price. Are investors being asked to pay way too much for all this potential? And on the surface, you'd have to say, yeah. The stock's price-to-earnings ratio, or PE, is sitting around 89. Now, what that means is, for every single rupee of profit the company makes, investors are willing to shell out 89 rupees to own the stock. That is a very, very high number. But hold on. What does a number like that actually mean in the real world? Is it an automatic red card? Let's put it into some perspective. You see, a high PE needs context.
For your average, boring company, 89 would be insane. But in the world of high-growth tech, PE ratios between 50 and 100, well, they're not that unusual. So while NPST is definitely living on the expensive side of the street, it's not in a totally different city. This pretty much confirms what we suspected. The market is pricing this stock for absolute perfection.
There's actually an even better tool for this. It's called the PEG ratio. The best way to think of it is as a fairness check that balances the high price against the fast growth. A score of around 1 suggests you're paying a fair price for the growth you're getting. NPST's PEG ratio? It's about 1.76. And that number tells a crystal clear story. Investors are paying a big premium today because they're betting the company's future growth is going to be truly spectacular. So, we've got a high-growth, high-potential business on one hand, but we've also got high risks and a really high price tag on the other. How does it all stack up? Let's bring it all together and see the final verdict from the source analysis.
This scorecard just perfectly captures the whole dilemma. Just look at those high scores. Business model strength gets a 9 out of 10. Growth and financials, they both get an 8. But then you get down to valuation comfort, and it gets a pretty weak 5. What this shows you is a fundamentally awesome company that is just, well, it's expensive.
And that leads us to the final takeaway from the source material. The verdict isn't some simple buy or sell. Instead, the analysis suggests that because the price tag is so steep, this is a stock that's really ideal for patient investors, people who are willing to build a position gradually, especially when the market has a bad day and the price dips to something more reasonable. So, we end right back where we started with a big question for you to think about. For a company like NPST, one that is literally on the cutting edge of global digital finance, is paying that premium price for such incredible potential a risk you can afford to take? Or, given the way the world is moving, is it actually a risk you can't afford to miss?